Hello, everyone. This is Rich Sierra, CEO of the Florida Small Business Legal Center. This is the inaugural version of our podcast, Business SOS. Since this is our first episode, I thought I'd perhaps introduce myself. I'm a business lawyer here in Florida. I've been in practice for 18 years. And during the last 18 years, I've met thousands of business owners. There are business owners that you see in strip malls. Could be your dry cleaners, your martial arts school, your restaurant. And I've met many of them, and I've basically found out that many of the issues they come to my office with are repeatable. That they basically, those issues they come to us are to repeat over and over again. So I thought perhaps it might be a good idea to write a book about it, to basically give you the most common themes that appear, that come up on a weekly basis that perhaps you actually might identify with and how to avoid them. But a little bit more about my background. I did not start as a business owner. This is my second business. I first started as a recruiter at a hospital, working recruiting nurses and allied health professionals here in South Florida. Then I basically started my own recruiting company, recruiting nurses from Canada. And when the internet began, I saw that there was an opportunity to create a job board, and I created healthcarerecruitment.com. It was one of the first job boards in the country that dealt with healthcare professionals. I ran that for about 8 years. Then I sold it in 2004. In 1998, I decided to go to law school. So I went in the evening while I was running my company during the day. I always wanted to be an attorney. It was a dream of mine, and I wanted to pursue that passion. So I went to law school in the evening, graduated in 2002, took the bar in 2004, passed it, fortunately, and then I decided to do what I'm passionate about, which is small business. And I started, my law firm. Now it's known Florida Small Business Legal Center, and I've been in business now for 18 years. We're located in Boca Raton, Florida, but we serve clients all over the state, and sometimes, in many cases, we have clients nationwide and some international clients. We handle contract disputes, litigation disputes, trademarks, pretty much if you're a business owner, anything that affects your business, we can handle. But let's talk about Business SOS. Business SOS is basically the 8 common legal mistakes the business owners make and how to avoid them. The purpose of the book, again, is to give you kind of the opportunity to really look at those landmines that you might face. And in the book, I'll talk about lease agreements, and this is one of the first mistakes I'm going to talk about today. I also talk about responding to losses by yourself, entering into partnerships with friends and family, signing contracts without hiring an attorney. And you'll get the idea that the purpose of, as a business owner, you're going to be facing many challenges along the way. And if you do it by yourself, you do it alone, you most likely going to run into problems that later are going to become a little bit more difficult to resolve. So by having an attorney help you at the beginning of the process, it'll be something that will help you avoid costly mistakes down the road. So let me talk about the first mistake. Then I'll give you an example. So we have this client of mine, we'll call him John. He wants to start a business. So he wants to start an ice cream shop. And he goes to the local mall, and he finds a nice location, nice foot traffic. You have a Publix next to it, so you have a good anchor store. And he goes ahead and say, you know what, I want to take a look at this lease agreement. And he finds a nice store, maybe it has 1,000 square feet. And he gets a lease from the landlord to review. It's a 5-year lease. Say it could be like $2,000 a month plus expenses. And it's the first time that John goes into business for himself. He's semi-retired. He decided to take some money from retirement account and start a brand new venture. Many people do that way. Nothing wrong with that. So he goes ahead and basically looks at the lease, says, great, let me go ahead and sign it. He signs a 5-year lease. He puts a large deposit of 2 months and a personal guarantee. Then he said, okay, so we're going to do a build out. So he spends like $25,000 in the build out. He hires employees. He decides to save money, goes ahead and puts these employees, hires local kids from the local high school, and puts them in independent contractors as 1099 employees, quote unquote. He hasn't started the business yet. So he builds a build out. He's ready to start his business. Then he goes ahead and goes to the city to get permits, and then gets the inspection, and then find out there's something issues and a problem with the plumbing of the actual location that needs to be fixed. So there's a delay in the opening because that's something that his responsibility now. So there's another delay. He was planning to open 2 months after the build out and find out that did not pass inspection. So it's another delay. So he gets the plumber there, gets it fixed. So you're talking about 3 months. So he wants to get a sign for his building, for his location. He has a graphic designer create a sign for his logo. And then he calls a sign company to create it. And then he finds out that the landlord needs the landlord's approval to be able to put a sign up. He did not know that. So landlord approves the sign, nothing wrong. It says the sign is good, go ahead and you're ready, but you need to get a permit from the city to be able to install the sign. So he goes to the city, and then to get the permit for the sign to be installed in front of his location, and then the city requests him, you need to have a trademark for the actual sign. He did not know that. So to get a trademark, it takes about 10 months if you're going to do it through the USPTO. You can get a Florida trademark a little bit faster, but yet he cannot install the sign until you get the proper trademark, according to the city. Some cities require them, some do not. This particular one, it did. So he basically said, okay, can I do a temporary sign? So he was able to put a sign up, one of those nylon signs that you said, or vinyl signs you see in the front of the store. But he was not able to install his sign. He eventually opened 3 months later, and then he did not know anything about social media, how to advertise. So the sales were kind of slow. He opened in the summer, which is a good time because it's hot, but at the same time, there was no school traffic. So sales at the beginning were slow, and then he found out that he did not have proper working capital to support those slow months. So then he came to me. He said, listen, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to make this business work. How do I get out of this lease? My answer is very difficult. So he signed a 5-year lease as a brand new. Let's talk from the very beginning what happened here. So John went in there with great expectations to start his business. First time he did it, he actually opened a business. So he went ahead and signed a 5-year lease. You're not going to use the $2,000 a month as an example, but that's a $24,000 a year commitment times 5 years. It's over $100,000 commitment that he signed with this lease with a personal guarantee. It's very difficult to get out of lease agreements. And if you sign a personal guarantee, you're actually on the hook for the amount of the lease, for the remainder balance of the lease. Unless the landlord is able to get a replacement of that tenant, of that space, after you actually are removed from the place, then you're only responsible for the amount that you did not pay. So if John would have come to me first, I would have basically asked him a number of questions. I would have asked him, is this your first business? If the answer would have been yes, in this case was yes, I would ask, okay, do you have a business plan? And if he would have said no, which he didn't have one, I would have told him, go and please get a business plan. It's important to do a business plan before you start a business. You're not going to be able to, my rule is this, if it does not work on paper, it's not going to work in real life. So in this particular case, he did not have a business plan. And I said, okay, so right now you're behind rent. He was not yet in default, but he was behind rent. So I said, okay, so we have to perhaps talk to the landlord, see what we can work out, increase your sales, get a credit line. So in this particular case, he was able to, increase his marketing to get more sales. He was able to get more foot traffic. He was able to reduce some of his expenses. He was able to make the business sustainable through the fall when the school season began to be able to get more foot traffic. So then we talk about his employees, and I'm like, I noticed that you have independent contractors. Are you requiring them to come to work? The answer is yes, they have to work there, have different shifts. They work from 10 a.m. to 3, and then from 4 o'clock to 9 p.m. I'm like, are you providing uniforms? Yes. So they're not independent contractors, they're employees. And you can get into significant legal problems if you're paying employees to independent contractors because you're not withholding taxes, you're not paying their employment taxes, you're not paying taxes to the payroll taxes to the state of Florida. So I said that is just a practice that is very common. Unfortunately, it's not a good practice to pay employees as independent contractors, what they call 1099 employees. That does not exist. To avoid the payroll responsibilities that you have as a business owner. It's just not a good idea to cut corners with employees. You're hurting them, you're eventually going to hurt yourself. Why is that? There are statutes specifically designed to protect employees who are not paid, and they're federal statutes. And there are law firms that specialize in helping these employees collect their overtime pay and collect vacation pay, collect the pay that they're entitled to receive because an employer decided to cut some corners. It's not a good idea. You're also taking a risk that if you are paying your employees as 1099 employees, that an employee may end up getting hurt in the job. Going back to the ice cream shop example, you might have an issue that employee slips and fall. It can happen. Employee gets injured with one of the machines. Anything can happen. So in this case, you have a workers' comp issue. In Florida, if you have more than 4 employees, you are required to have workers' comp insurance. Many employers decide, or business owners decide to say, well, I cannot afford insurance, I'm not going to buy it. It's just not a good idea. If you're an employer, even if you have 1 employee, my advice is get a workers' comp. I don't care if they work an office job, but they're basically in front of the computer. Get a workers' comp insurance. It gives you the right protection. So continuing with this example in the lease agreement, going back to the sign, so John eventually got his trademark. He was able to get his sign up. The landlord approved. He got the sign company, John's Ice Cream Shop. He was able to finally get his business up and running. But he faced a number of illegal issues just opening the shop, and I'll give you a couple of them. He went in there, he got a lease agreement. That's something that every business owner faces for the most part, unless the business owner owns the building. You will sign a lease, whether it's an office lease or you're a retail establishment, you will sign a lease, and it's probably the second major expense that you will face. Another legal issue that he faced, it was hiring employees. So there's the responsibility when you hire an employee, you're taking that responsibility. You need to have the right procedures in place, the policies in place to provide the employee with the right paycheck. You have minimum wage laws. You need to understand that when you hire the employee, it is your responsibility to know there are laws with respect to the payroll responsibilities to the federal government and to the state government. It is assumed that you know them. If you do not know them, that's not a defense. The third legal issue that he faced was basically within the lease was getting the trademark for his business. So he went. We helped him get the trademark, and this we can have another segment on trademarks. But in this particular case, he was able to get the trademark for his logo. He got it approved by the city, which is the fourth legal issue, is dealing with getting the business tax receipt for the city that he was working with, which is the city of Margate, and also getting the business tax receipt for Broward County as well. So it's four legal issues, and also, of course, if he had a build out, he had to deal with the contract with the builder, with the contractor, general contractor, to be able to build his store. So even before he opened the store, there were 5 legal issues there, and none of them he had an attorney helping him. There are just too many landmines along the way that you're going to be facing, or he faced, just before opening the business. Once you open, you're going to be facing even more potential issues because now you're dealing with the public. So every single customer that comes into your door, every single client that you enter into a contract with could be a potential dispute. Fortunately, it does not happen very often because it'll be impossible to actually operate. But you have to be cognizant of the fact that you got to have certain level of protection. Having the knowledge base that of what the business, having the knowledge base of what can happen as you go into business before it happens will prepare you to recognize the potential issues that might happen along the way. So when you see that it's going to happen, then you say, okay, now I know. I know that if I'm going to have a lease agreement, I should have a lawyer review it. And when you have a lawyer review a lease agreement, it's not necessarily to review it to see whether the contract is legal. I will tell you right now that the lease agreement that you're going to be presented with is a very valid legal document. So many people come to my office and ask me, is this a legal document? What should I look for? And my answer is you look for everything. You just need to understand what you're signing. Another rule of thumb that I have is that if you do not understand a contract, do not sign it. Lease agreements are for the benefit of the landlord. They're not for your benefit. There are some protections, and I'm talking here about commercial lease agreements. Commercial lease agreements are really for the benefit of the landlord, and they're a handful of protections for the tenant. So my question that I ask my clients is when they're about to sign a lease agreement, I said, have you done a business plan that you have projections on your sales and revenues that will support this lease? And if the answer is no, or the answer is I do not know, and I said, you got to do some performance, you got to do some projections, you got to understand that you have to pay this lease. The landlord does not care whether you are successful in business or do not. They don't care. Okay, they care obviously to the extent that you want to pay that lease, but they're really not going to go into your business plan. They're not going to go into your advertising. They're not going to know whether or not you know what you're doing. They assume that you know what you're doing because you went to them to get the lease. They'll present you a lease. They qualify you financially. But it is your responsibility to make this work. So if you're not very sure how many sales it will take, how many customers it will take for you to be able to make that lease happen, cover your expenses, take a step back and then kind of work it in paper. And as I told you before, if it does not work on paper, it does not work in real life. Again, my book is Business SOS, 8 Common Legal Mistakes Business Owners Make and How to Avoid Them. I hope you enjoyed this first episode. Again, this is Rich Sierra. Until next week. Remember that if you need to reach me, you can check out the Florida Small Business Legal Center.com. And until next week, and remember, my goal is to help you succeed.